this is the second to the last meeting of 2024, December 2nd. Um, and I have a couple little video clips from various Christmas programs prepared to share with you. um, One of them actually is a couple of Christmas tunes. I don't know, carols, hymns, whatever. But unlike most of the examples that I have found, it doesn't use beep. It actually uses the AY chip, so it actually sounds decent. I mean, for 1986 or whatever year it was, and uh, so we can get to that during a slow moment. I didn't have an agenda beyond that, but Tim and Gustavo started talking just before the meeting, and they were picking up on a conversation from the last meeting we had. Tim has been working on doing what's necessary to make this thing called Boreal Basic, ZX Basic, which is a sort of an enhanced feature set of Spectrum Basic. So if you already know how to program in Spectrum Basic, you can easily work with this. You can program on any computer, Windows, Mac, Linux, because this little tool set, this Boreal Basic tool set, is written in Python, and it takes the basic and compiles it into machine code. And Tim got a huge amount done, and then sort of ran into a stumbling block. And at the end of the last meeting, he said, "Hey, can anybody help us with that?" And Gustavo stepped in, and I've seen these back and forth emails for the past couple weeks now from them as they work through, these little problems. With that, hey Tim, would you mind sort of just catching us up on that?
So they're basically the one that was there are two routines that were failing, string, str, and val. Um, I also found a few other things I'd missed previously because I did a more deeper dive. Um, and we found that the reclaim function call ROM call on the Spectrum and the same ROM call on the 2068 didn't give the same results. Gustavo found that in the Spectrum it returned a value of like 1 or 2 or something like that, and on the 26 returned a value of FF or 255. And it was basically going in and reclaiming data. So it says, okay, this is how much space I need to reclaim, and reclaiming a lot more than needed to, and that was causing problems. So the workaround was to implement the Spectrum reclaim locally, meaning just basically instead of calling the ROM, call the local routine stored on in the id.asm file. For Val, we still had some problem, but eventually I did some change, and then now it's working. I'm not sure exactly what I did, but I'm happy that it's working. I'm always looking for people to test it. The next thing was the load and save, because those called the EXROM, which is not part of the normal, that's totally different from the Spectrum. And Gustavo, I looked in my spam folder, and I looked at my understanding, and the last thing you sent me was, hey, send me a couple of examples, compile the following program, and so on. And I replied back to you, and I don't think I heard back from you. So if you have something, just resend, and I hopefully should get it. Again, I checked my spam. I didn't see anything there. I don't really
I
check
send to
that very
you
often.
now. Please check if you receive. I forward both email at this time.
And
All right,
Tim,
yep.
the reclaim function, I know what this does, but I just want to confirm. When you allocate space for a string, you want to get that space back, and the reclaim function sort of collapses that bit of memory back down.
Okay, Gustav, I just got 2 emails in from you. So great. So I can take a look at them. Say it once again, David.
So when you allocate when the Spectrum allocate or the Sinclair allocates space for a string, and you're done using that string, the reclaim function collapses that space back down,
Right.
reclaims
I
it.
think I was doing a string of a single one, single number or something, so it was relatively small. But the results coming back on the 26.8 version was too large, causing a crash. So we implemented the ROM call directly, the Spectrum version, in the .asm file, create a run reclaim.asm, have the ASTR call that.
Okay.
So everything so far, most things are working. Um, I have ported over some programs. My first thing I do is I get the source code and .bs file, and I compile on the spectrum for the Spectrum. So I've got two. Boreal Basic runs locally, so I've got a Spectrum directory where I've installed it, and a 26.8 directory where I've installed it. So I go in the Spectrum run it locally, and if it compiles fine, great. I know I can then just run it to the 26.8. If it fails to compile for some odd reason, bad syntax error, I typically don't okay, it's not going to compile for the Spectrum, so we can worry about it later.
Cool.
So I've done a few that way. I've done some of my own stuff that I've compiled. I'm finding that anything involving math doesn't go a whole lot faster because it's still using the same function, floating point calculator, which slows things down. If you're not using math, it seems to do pretty good. All the little video games that I've sort of ported over go fast. I haven't really tried them. Well, you can't really try them because they're so Boreal ZX Basic is a superset of Spectrum Basic.
Yeah.
There are some commands that do not translate, like the input command. You can't just run, if you have input command in your original basic program, it won't work. You have to convert it. It also has things like on go to, no, sorry, do while, do until, you can do nested loops, not something nested, but you can, you could also do normally it's if then something. Well, you can do if then statement, and then end if.
Okay.
So it's more like a structured programming language. It's actually based on Free Basic.
Oh.
So if you're used to Pascal or Super Basic or C, you can program a lot more like that. You can get rid of
What is Free Basic?
Pardon?
What is Free Basic?
Free Basic is a version of Basic that is one free, but it is designed for other platforms. It's its own version, probably closer to True Basic and how it works. But it is a multi-platform version of Basic, and the guy just basically grabbed that and said, "Okay, I'm just going to link up Free Basic and Sinclair Basic, and then change things as necessary." So
And Free Basic is for Windows and such, or Linux, or modern computers, or old days?
Multi-platform. I think it is.
Okay.
I think all three.
Okay.
So it's been around a while.
Yeah, it's been around for a while. Let's see here. Windows, DOS, and Linux, it says.
Okay.
So, yeah. And it can, Free Basic works in a, you can write, you can use quick basic syntax with Free Basic.
Yeah, I know that Quick Basic was kind of like the popular, although I looked at Quick Basic, kind of hated it. But one thing with Boreal Basic, it does ask you to declare your variables like Quick Basic does. If you don't, it'll assume. And I had a problem where things were failing because it was assuming the wrong type. 26.8 assumes everything's float.
Mm-hmm.
ZX Basic doesn't. So I had to go in and specifically say this is float, this is integer, and so on. And then my program started working right.
Oh, wow. Wow.
So
neat. So
yeah, Adam, QBasic is Quick Basic. They shortened it.
Yeah.
What about GWiz Basic?
Oh, right.
By the way, this is really nice. You mentioned
Isn't that nice?
last time, David. So this is the ZX Basic. It's like everything is coming out of Spain, I think, because this guy wrote the Spectrum book. Knew about the game. Did this one? So this originally released in Spanish, now released in English. It is thick.
Wow.
Yes.
600 or 700 pages. 668. Yeah, so almost 700, 675, something like that. It is very interesting. The guy's got a lot of good examples. It's all for the Spectrum, but it should all generally work for the 26.8 once you get, basically you update get my files, throw them into the thing, and then it'll compile for the 26.8 generally with no problem. Again, as long as I've seen, if long compiles for the Spectrum with no issues, it'll compile fine for the 26.8. But it's got a lot of great examples in this book.
Yeah.
So, it was $31. It's a print on demand. Again, you see how thick it is. Where's the other one?
Did yours come quickly? Because mine came really quickly.
Yeah. So this is the assembly one, which is so thick.
Yeah.
Here's the other one.
Are those from like
So
Amazon?
if you got
you're
the
saying?
assembly,
Yeah.
how thick this one is.
I'm just grabbing the link right
This
now.
is this is the CX assembly that David's been talking about. It's actually pretty good. He's very Windows centric and lots of IDE stuff. But this one's pretty good too. Also Windows centric, but lots of stuff, lots of sample code. It's just, and it's nice having a book that has more information than I probably need versus the other way around. Like, oh, I need more. This has got a lot. So, again, pricey at 31, but well, it's by the weight. You see how thick it is. So
for the number of pages, I mean, seriously, it's a deal.
yeah.
31.
Is there like a PDF version that you
No,
could just buy? Oh, okay.
no, not that I'm aware of. Well, there might be a Kindle
There's a
version.
Kindle version, but that's locked into the Kindle.
Right.
But it's print on demand, but it's got the nice soft, binding to it, just like the assembly book. But it feels great. Feels like this, the same as the assembly book. So
What
I
does it
think
smell
both
like?
came out of Spain, which is surprising.
What does it smell like?
Oh man, you got good. Yeah, books have
Have a smell?
some of them.
All right.
Hopefully it has that new book smell.
It's not musty yet.
No smell at all.
Oh,
It's not
okay,
really-
bummer.
Now, old books, that's what smells. Yes, I know.
Well,
I
or-
recognize that smell.
Or magazines. Magazines have certain smells.
Oh, the ink smell. Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Gustavo?
After analyze, the compiler really is a great compiler. The internal structure is very efficient. Do the small quantity of calls to the ROM, only the necessary calls. The rest is very, very interesting, the memory structure. The only question maybe you have the data is regarding if you analyze the block, okay, that the compile create at the output, for example, the tab file. I see the initialization part in the beginning at the 8000 in X in the middle of the RAM, and then a big hole with zeros, and then the code compiler of the basic. You can split the initialization and the code, or the idea is to do not load the zeros in the middle. That could be possible. I don't know if your tab converter program or is the real compiler that do that.
I don't think it's anything Tim's doing. It's probably Boreal Basic that's doing that.
So all I'm doing is I've gone through all the .asm files and found the calls to the Spectrum ROM and just switched them to the 26.8 ROM. Even if they're at odd locations, I compare the two ROMs and say, okay, here's where there's where the assembly is exactly the same. And it's that A over here, I just find the B over on the 26.8 and then replace it. That's it. I'm nothing fancy that. I'm not making any changes to the Python. I'm not even going to touch the Python. I'm just basically saying, okay, in this this file, I'll comment out the Spectrum ROM, put in the 26.8 ROM, and that's it. The only thing we have to do was the reclaim feature. Other than that, I'm not doing anything. It's a quick and dirty. There's no command line optional compile for this versus that. No, you compile like you were as a Spectrum. So the Boreal doesn't know it's doing 26.8. It's just this, I need to do this CLS function. Oh, I'll go and grab that CLS.asm. Boom, throw that in. I did change CLS.asm, by the way, because it actually does its own version of CLS. I've been playing with OS 64, and I found that their own version of CLS doesn't work because it doesn't take into account the DF file 2, display file 2. So I basically use the ROM call, and that works just fine. So
Or you need to replace the CLS routine by the new one. Use the same method that the regline.
again, it was working fine. But when I run using OS4, CLS failed because it's basically manually clearing out the display file one and attribute file one, which is not allowed, which is only half the display in 64 column mode. So I used the ROM call and it works just fine.
No, you can do a patch, a very simple patch, copy the first screen to the second screen. If you clear the second screen,
But
finish in blank.
you said the ROM call works just fine.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah, just the 2068 ROM call works.
Oh.
So why create I mean, it's like a bunch of lines of code when I'm just go, well, let me do one line of ROM call. Boom, it's problem solved.
Yeah.
So I don't know why it works. I'm assuming maybe OS64 has some hooks that maybe CLS knows how to handle the 64 call mode. I don't know.
Or maybe the OS60. You're doing this with the OS64 cartridge.
Yeah, the doc file.
Okay.
Or could be the 2040A.
No, it might be that the OS64's CLS command is taking over, hijacking the
ROM call, right?
The Timex one. Yeah.
Has anybody disassembled the OS64 ROM doc file?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, that's kind of on. I like to take a look because another thing I've been working on is playing with it. I thought, well, hey, I've never tried it. So let me go see what I can do and figure out what compile. Does ZX Boreal Basic work with it? Does assembly? Does regular Basic? That all seems to work. Z8DK does not. So,
Boreal Basic is available from, I forgot the name of the website.
Hey, it'll be out in the next next ZX zine. We'll have information on it.
Okay. So by that point, roughly, you and Gustavo will hopefully have all the kinks ironed out for the 2068 version.
Yeah, I'm gonna take a look what he sent me, and I got some free time to figure out to read it and analyze it.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I mean it's really, like you said, it's a nifty implementation of BASIC, and it's kind of like just a cross compiler instead of being
It's really good compiler.
Yeah.
Very impressive with this product for the Sinclair computers. It's really, really amazing. I know another compiler like C Basic for CPM or whatever, but this is the same level of compiler inside the structure, no?
Yeah. And written in Python. So
I think it does produce some large code. I mean, like if you do a hello world, it's like a 6K executable, but that's probably all runtime. But it does a pretty good job. Seeing a lot of stuff out there, people are using it to create Spectrum stuff. So
very cool.
And the most part of you say that is a runtime is a temporary area, and also is clear in zeros. You load a ton of zeros in the middle. That's why you can have a short block if you move or clear by software this area, not with the program. That could be possible, but not with this release. You need to do the modification of the compiler, of course.
I don't know if Python even try. I don't want to know Python, but
I know an expert of Python too. I only assemble C or another language, but not Python.
Oh, you guys. There's nothing wrong with Python. Paul, your topic, Paul, has piqued at least one question from Adam about what exactly is bloat.
Well, I made a mistake a couple of weeks ago. Turned out to be a 3.25 billion byte mistake.
3.5 billion byte. Okay.
Which is rather a large file. I clicked, I was trying to find some information that I had remembered seeing in the in the io.org or whatever.
Yeah.
And somehow I clicked the button, it zipped up the whole damn thing. I mean, the whole thing. And okay, so I downloaded it.
Uh-huh. Good, good. Yeah. Now you have the answer, right? Somewhere.
Okay, now, part of what I remembered when I first tippy-toed through some of the messages just to get a feel for the flavor of what was transpiring at the time, I thought I saw something that mentioned that space was a problem and the solution was throw more money at it.
That's correct.
Okay, so ages ago, I looked at files and file formats and structures as a learning experience in a PC world. And learned to set Thunderbird many versions ago for plain text.
Oh.
So everything I ever communicated via email went out as plain text.
Mm-hmm.
That worked pretty good. I haven't been using the more current iterations of Thunderbird because of some buggy boo with my ISP that I haven't researched enough to solve.
Mm-hmm.
That's on my fault. But anyway, back to observations. There were approximately 42 million lines in that file.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a fair number of them are how the email system stores both zip files and picture files, image files,
Mm-hmm.
and when you upload share to program. The process breaks it down into a conventional coded message so that some of the weird characters that throw things out of whack don't get transmitted. They get translated into a code and then they get untranslated at the far end.
Okay.
So some of the messages in the massive database were in plain text. Some of them were in a different format, which was all coded, which needed to be decoded at the receiving end.
Mm-hmm.
Some of it was in HTML.
Mm-hmm.
Then some of it was in text and HTML. How it got that way, I don't know. Some of it was in text, HTML, and coded
Mm-hmm.
for one message.
Yep.
Now, when it's broken into, when text is modified to be HTML, it adds a lot of space necessary for the same message. It adds even more space when it gets coded in at UT864.
Yes.
I can understand why you reached a threshold, so I got to pay more in order to support the space. Also, image files.
That's the real problem.
Yeah, they get coded so that they're not a problem transmitting by the originating end and the receiving end. In messing with portable devices, taking pictures, and some cameras, maybe most of the digital cameras, they don't shoot images at a high resolution. What they do is they shoot images in a lot of inches, and that gets compressed down to give the depth and the quality that the image can be usable for other purposes, like maybe printing out.
Mm-hmm.
So the standard dots per inch for an image file, pretty much, I won't say everything is that, but it's either 72-bit dots per inch or 96. Whereas for commercial printing processing, a minimum of 300 dots per inch is good quality.
Okay. Yes. Understood.
Taking a picture with a portable device at 72 DPI in order to get the resolution quality, it might be a 20 or 30-inch picture, image file, based on the software I use for processing graphics.
Okay.
So if I see an image file that's 20 inches plus and it's 72 DPI, I can shrink it down to a 4x6 at 300 DPI and have a pretty doggone good looking picture.
Paul, digital
But
images are not measured in inches; they're measured in pixels,
I know
and the pixels never change, and the
that's
PPI
true.
is just
But when you go to print, you're
approximation.
printing on paper.
Well, that's a different issue.
Yeah, I know.
When it comes to the storage of files on, online, it's pixels, bit depth, which
So,
turns into file size. So,
nevertheless, take an uncompressed or a reasonably compressed picture image file, if it's a JPEG,
Yeah.
because that's a lossy format, can be 2 or 3 megabytes.
Yeah.
If it's not processed to either shrink the physical size or modify the dots per inch and live with it that way. Because
So
you can take
Paul, I think what you're getting at is you're going to suggest that we all use more data efficient means of sending email messages and sending photos to the list, and that's
a little
nice.
editing and
Well, let
shooting
me
and plain
interrupt you for a
text.
sec. Let me interrupt you for a sec, Paul, because the problem here is not us. The problem is the service, and if you don't pay, you can't edit anything. And so, without we
You
got to
edit
that
ahead
point,
of time.
it's not going to happen. I mean, I
Well,
appreciate what you're saying, but it's just flat out not going to happen.
Yeah.
I know
don't
Carl
know
is just going to go
where
out with his
the
26
HTML gets
megabyte.
thrown in.
What's that?
I don't know where in the process the HTML gets thrown in
By
or
everybody's
do
email
it.
client. The amount of effort it would take for us to turn off rich email in our clients just for groups.io's issues. It's not worth chasing
Okay.
people. It's the
Well, and then this is more of an administration situation, I believe.
Yeah, and really the simplest solution is what David did, which is throw some money at the problem, and then if it does become a real issue, he can go in. He's the only one who has the power to do this. He can go in and trim out the saved photos and other stuff that we've sent, or just pay more money and get a little bit more space. Many of us have offered to reimburse David, and he said that's not necessary yet. But when that bridge comes, we'll cross it, and we'll just find him and mail him money.
Okay, that works.
Guys, it is kind of amusing that we're talking about these file sizes. Just a moment ago, Tim was saying how you get that bloat of 6K when you compile the program and run it on the Timex.
Right, a Timex screen capture is bigger than the actual file itself. Yeah, no, I get where you're coming from, Paul, but really the issue is groups.io, and it's part of their money making. It's how they're going to get us to pay them is to limit the ability to do stuff. And really, Carl's the real criminal here. Well, with all those big pictures that he sends.
Well, I wasn't going to name names, but there are several heavy hitters.
No, I'm just being a smart ass. I'm just yanking Carl's chain because he sent across some beautiful images this past week.
Yeah, that's the problem too. Is some other forums that I'm on, you can upload a picture to it, right? Where Groups.io, you can inline it, I guess, but a lot of times I'll reply in my email client, right? I won't reply in Groups.io, so that kind of. Anyway, but yeah, you're right. I do like to send high quality pictures. I hate crappy pixelated pictures that you can't see.
Well, maybe on that note, Carl, what pictures have you uploaded recently of anything you might have gotten?
Yeah, I mean, have you done anything recently, Carl? Would warrant sending big pictures?
I've missed a couple of the meetings, and I didn't mean to. I think the last two, but I'm busy doing something, and 7 o'clock rolls by, and I don't have an alarm set or anything, and then next thing I know, it's like 9:30, and I'm like, shit, I totally missed a meeting.
So you need Adam to call you, is what you're saying.
Well, yeah, I
Yeah, I
set an
could do
alarm
that.
this time. Yeah, I set an alarm this time, and so I was like, damn it, I mean, not that I intended to miss them, but yeah, time just, you get involved into something, and yeah, 2 hours goes by like nothing. But yeah, I've done a few things. I know, I don't know what I'm trying to think. There's a list of them.
Well, all right. So let's start with your improvements to the 1510.
Okay, yeah. So I spent some time a couple months ago learning this easy EDA, right? Which is, I guess
For
something
those
that,
who don't know, could you tell what the 1510 is?
Yeah, there are people
I,
going to watch this who have no clue.
so the 1510 is originally was Timex's solid state cartridge player, right? For the 1000, the 1500, and of course the ZX81. And they came out with 4 cartridges that Timex originally came out with for the player. And again, I think it was just their attempt to get into the solid state software game, right? So that instant load and, because tape recording, saving and loading programs was kind of it was the cheapest way to do it, but it kind of sucks. And it takes some time and it'll fail. And then now you just wasted all that time, right? So solid state software works every time and it loads pretty much right away. So that's what the 1510 was intended to do. And then of course we all know on the 2600 or the 2068, it had the cartridge port built in, right? That's another reason why they took an extra year almost to get that product out, was they definitely wanted that capability in it. Because you had all these other machines, right, that had that from the get-go. Commodore 64, VIC-20, Atari 400, 800, all these home computers had that capability. And so for Timex to come out with a new machine that didn't, probably wasn't the best, wouldn't have been the best marketing for them. But anyway, so basically what it is, I went and kind of looked at, I know Joe had made tried to fix some problems, because that was kind of my issue. I wanted to fix the issues that we had with the existing circuit boards. And but I didn't know Easy EDA, and I was kind of learning KiCad or KiCad or whatever you want to call that PCB program. And so I said, well, shoot, I'm just gonna JLC PCB is where I mostly get most of my boards from, and they kind of work. Or I don't know how Easy EDA is part of there. It seems like it's part of them.
I think it's their product. Yeah.
Right. And so I was like, well, since I use them, and Claudius had stuff in I think Easy EDA, and so I just said, let me just sit down and kind of work through this, right? It can't be that hard, and it really wasn't. But going through and looking at how Claudius set his up, I fixed the issues that he had, mainly with the switching of the address lines into the chip selection logic. Fixed that, and then the silk screen, or not the silk screen, the solder mask he had over the copper on the expansion ports, which I had to use my Dremel tool and sand that off. And if you weren't careful, you would sand the damn the copper off of the board, right. And so kind of that So anyway, I didn't want to have to do that for forever and ever. I bought a lot of boards. I think I bought like 25 or something, or maybe even 50 boards of those. So those are going to probably get tossed, right? Because I mean, they're just, you have to take a Dremel also and cut the traces in the PCB to kind of fix, the selection logic problem that he had. Anyway, long story short is I went and fixed all that stuff and made a new design and had some boards made. And that's one thing I showed, right, was the fixed version of the 1510 cartridge boards. The cartridge boards really weren't that bad. It was just an A15 line, right? There was no A15 line that was used, because Claudius was only really using the 8K programs. So, and he was using the smaller chip. He was using the 256 chip, right? The 16K chip.
Yeah.
32K chip. Sorry, he was using the 32K chip because it could hold 4 8K cartridge programs, right? So I moved it to a 512 bit chip, so that holds 64K. So now we could hold four 16K or four 8Ks. You kind of waste space in there, but so I made it so that it could hold the 16K programs. And that's kind of where Ryan stepped in a little bit. I kind of pulled on his ear and it's like, hey, can we look at, modifying some of these existing programs that we have to run on the cartridge? And so, that led him off to look at that. And he came up with a bunch of programs that, he did convert. So we're getting more, solid state software that we can use this cartridge player for, which is kind of my intention, right? And so the interface printed circuit board that actually the cartridge plugs into is where most of the problems were, right? And so that board got not totally reworked, but I fixed all the problems, got the silk solder mask fixed, made the keyways part of the, JLC-PC cut those out for me. I didn't have to do it here when I got them. The only thing I have to really cut up now is just the connectors, right? When I solder on, you don't get, 23 times 2. Yeah, you can't buy those anymore. So you just have to get a big one and cut it down. So anyway, yeah, so I made a new interface board and I made a new cartridge board, and I threw that up on the forum and said, hey, I'm getting ready. I'm putting these together. I'm going to test them, and they tested okay. And so now I'm kind of offered them for sale. But then again, as I was doing that, I was working on further improvements.
Yeah.
I didn't really care for the 4. I mean, 4 programs is good. And I know we had talked about that at some point in one of our discussions that, it's kind of the allure of the cartridge, right? You don't have too many, you don't want to have everything on one cartridge, because then it's like, why even bother making a cartridge, I guess. But I kind of wanted something at least 16, maybe even 32 programs on it. So that's kind of what I ended up working on and doing, is making it uses 4 megabit EPROMs, which Jamico, or whatever you want to call it, company in California, they had these Toshiba ones, which they're clearancing them out, right? They're like, I think 60, 70 cents a piece.
Oh my gosh.
So I said, hell,
let me run over there.
Yeah.
Question. When you create the board for the expansion of the 1500 for cartridge, the only hole in the map is in chunk 1, or you have more space to allocate memory into the cartridge?
Well, the way the 1510 was designed from Timex was you have, if you want to talk about chunks, it's chunk 1, right, is obviously where the 8K, the main 8K ones are. But then you also have chunk, what would that be, 4 and 5 can also hold cartridge programs. But you have to realize that the way the 1510 works is it's not your traditional cartridge, right? It's not like some of these other ones where it's actually running the program from the cartridge. All the 1510 really does is copies the program into the RAM of the system and runs it from there. So it's just kind of a temporary place to hold the program, right? But at least you don't have to load it from tape.
Okay. You move the block to the basic area and then run.
Yeah.
Right. You might have to set some variables up and some, we found, Ryan kind of found that out, that some programs, because there's about 100 bytes in the beginning, from 2000 to 2100. Right. Yeah. And that in that area, that's where Timex chose to put, like, I call a header program. Right. So there's machine code there that does the copying. It sets up some variables if it needs it, and things like that. If it's a basic program cartridge, right, then it's going to have to set up some variables for that. It can't just copy it and run it, because especially on the 1500, it doesn't initialize those variables.
Okay, and these routines or these variables are documented, or just only?
Well, they're the standard system variables, right? But the 1000 and the ZX81, it goes through a full initialization, right? So it sets up all those variables before it kicks you into the K. right? The K cursor. Whereas the 1500, what it does is it just sees if the cartridge is there and it goes and kicks the cartridge off, right? So it doesn't do any of that initialization. So you either have to, set some of those variables up yourself, which is, like I said, what Ryan found out, that you can't just, some programs will work without you setting any variables up, but other programs won't. And so that's kind of where he was running into problems where they wouldn't work, right? So we had to go back and kind of figure out and look at some of the programs that Timex converted, right? Like chess and states and capitals, which I'm sure states and capitals is a basic program, right? I'm sure there's no machine language in there, but so he had to look and see how Timex set up some of these variables and the display file and those kind of things. Because I was running into problems where, not problems, but the program would actually work on a 1000, right? You would let it boot up to the K, randomize user 8192 to kick the cartridge off, and it would work. On the 1500, when it auto-loaded, it wouldn't work. It would crash. So that's kind of another light bulb went off that, hey, why is it doing that? Is because the 1000 fully initializes everything before you even start the cartridge. Whereas they didn't do that in the 1500. It's almost like they initialized some things really quick and then looked and see if the cartridge was there. If it was, then it kicked it to the cartridge. Because it kind of assumes 16K of RAM was available, right? It didn't do the RAM check, things like that. And ironically, some of the cartridges actually do the RAM check in that small header program, right? And I know one program, I think when I was over with Adam and Ryan was with us, I think it was Croxy Road or something that we were doing, that we loaded it up and it started like instantly. A lot of the cartridge programs, they still take a little time. They boot and you're right. It takes a couple, right? I think it's doing the RAM check.
Oh yeah.
It's doing it because the copying of the code, even if it's a lot, even if it's like 13K of code, happens really fast.
Is it
right?
using like an elder to do that?
Yes, it uses a whole, just one machine language command from start to finish and then just do it.
Okay.
And so we just noticed with Croxy Road, you would hit the reset button right on the 1510, which has a reset button, and then it would within like 1 or 2 seconds just come up with Croxy Road. Just bam.
That was the speed that they needed back then. Why couldn't they have come out with that program back in '83?
But
it would have been the hit that that Timex needed. For both the the 1000, 1500 and the 2068, and we wouldn't even be talking about it being a failed system. We'd be talking about how amazingly successful the Timex computers were.
Yeah, and it's kind of ironic because, like I said, the way the 1510 is designed, it's looking at those 2 memory chunks or 3 memory chunks if you look at it that way. So if we decided to make our own design, because we don't need 2 separate chips in the cartridge anymore, right? It's just that's just not possible. Well, now you could do it that way, but it'd be kind of stupid, right? Just put everything in one program or one contiguous memory location in these bigger flash chips, and then we could write our own code to transfer it over, right? Instead of using Timex's code and using the selection logic. But anyway, it is what it is, the way it's designed right now. I'm just saying you could redesign that a little bit and make it a little bit more efficient. Maybe have the cartridge at 8,000 to the 16K block up there, so it's all contiguous, and that way it'd be one LDIR transfer instead of 2, and you wouldn't be messing around, jumping around the RAM chunks, right? Because that's basically what the cartridge has to do if you want 16K. But anyway, I kind of digressed there with the so I was designing a cartridge that I wanted to, and we had discussed this in the past about maybe using a rotary hex rotary switch, right? And so I kind of said, okay, well, let's look and see. Jamico has those for a couple of bucks a piece, right? So I was like, okay, well, there's that. And so I started designing that, and I was like, well, 16 programs, but I used the 4 megabit chips, like I mentioned. They were 70 cents a piece. I mean, how can you beat that, right? So I think I got 20 or 25 of those. Granted, they're EPROMs, so the die in them is absolutely huge. The window is like, half of the chip.
Oh my gosh. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like kind of funny to look at. Anyway, and I know my one programmer doesn't support it, the Toshiba's, but I have another one. I can't remember the Wellen or Winden or something. It was kind of more of an expensive programmer, but it supports the Toshiba's, so I can actually program those. But then I was also thinking, well, you could get the flash chips, right? You could get the 4 megabit flash chips, but the pinout's a little different, right?
Yeah.
So I put some jumpers on the cartridge board to account for that, right? So if you're going to use an EEPROM like I am, you want the jumpers over on the EEPROM side. If you want to use a flash chip, move the jumpers over to the flash side. So we got the two bases covered there. The only reason I didn't go with the flash is because 70 cents is better than, I don't know, the 4 megabit flash chips are like $3 or $4.
Yeah.
Which isn't bad, but still.
As Timex owners, we're cheap.
I was like 70. Come on, 70 cents? You can't beat that. So the other thing is like, okay, well now we've got a capability of 32 programs, right? So we've got a lower 256K set and an upper 256K set, right?
Wow.
So you have I put an upper and lower single dip switch, but then it came to the part where what program are you on? I guess you could look. Most of our eyes are pretty crappy at this point. So you're not going to be able to see the little numbers that are etched on this little tiny rotary switch.
And so you have a little is it a 2-digit LED?
No, it's
Seven
I put 2 digits on there, 2 separate little digits, but the one just says L or U. Tells you if it's lower bank or upper bank. Right?
Okay.
And the next digit shows you the program number, 0 through F.
Oh. Are you going to include a hex conversion chart for those of us who refuse to learn it?
Well, no. You'll have to make that up on your own, I suppose. But
you'll have to buy the cartridge for the system.
Count it on your fingers and toes.
Yeah. Well, I also noticed that a gentleman created a he basically looked at it's a 7447, right, which is a BCD to 7-segment decoder chip, but those don't decode anything above 9. Well, they do, but it puts out weird crap on the display, right? It's not really designed for that, for the 10 through 15. So what he did is he got it's an Atmel part, but it's a programmable. It's a little programmable great thing. Yeah, exactly. It's
programmable array logic, I think.
Something like that. It's not. It's a EE. I kind of put it in the forum what it was, but it's so he came up with a circuit that he designed that software wise inside that chip that does the same thing as the 47 or the 7447, but it also decodes the hex. So if you go to 10, it actually puts A, right, as in E and C and D, which the original wouldn't do. And he made it so that it basically is the same pinout and everything. So I kind of copied that. I mean, I credit him. I'm not really, trying to steal anything from him. But so I bought a bunch of those chips, programmed them up. And so when the boards are still on their way here. I don't have the boards. I have all the parts. I don't have the boards yet, which is typical. And so when I put one of those together, we'll see how that works.
Cool.
Right. So we'll have 32 potential programs, which is actually more programs than we have converted.
So Ryan, so people need to get busy finding programs they want converted, and then Ryan needs to get busy converting those programs or making it available. I think he did make his stuff available on his GitHub.
Yeah, I think Paul had his hand up.
Oh, did you think about using ZIF sockets?
Somebody mentioned that. I don't know if it was.
Those are
I know it
not
wasn't.
cheap anymore, Paul. They are really expensive. Like $11,
Oh,
$12 a part.
well, they
Maybe
didn't
it
used to
was.
be.
Yeah, they didn't used to be. I mean, I think it was Rich J he wanted me to send him like a cartridge kit, right? He was going to put it together because he was going to use a zip socket on there, and
Yeah.
and I was like, okay, yeah, I can do that. I don't. I
Or to
have the
make another
parts and I
board.
have the boards. Yeah, exactly. So I can just send him the parts, and he could put the zip socket on because again, I think, like I said, some people like the fact that you're actually using cartridges. You only have 4 games, and you want more, you have to pull it out, and put another cartridge in. It's
Grab another
just
cartridge. Yeah.
right. So, but I was like, 32 is going to be it. I mean, if once we get to 32 and you want more, then you have to get another cartridge. But at least you've got a pretty good handful of games on one cartridge that you can use on your. I can't believe I'm saying this on your freaking 1000. But little did I know I'd be, making hardware for that thing. I'd kind of thought I'd be doing stuff for the 2068, but
Here we are.
anyway, so in line with that, if I may, we had discussed at some point maybe having ROM software cartridges, right, that actually replace the ROM inside the 1000,
Oh,
so
right,
that
right.
you could boot up, Treeforth or that
Yeah.
ASMIC fourth,
Yeah,
and
without
then
having to get in the inside
right,
and make weird
exactly.
adapters and shit. Yeah.
Right, but you have to, but there's some, like I said, technical things there with how the video is generated in the 1000. It has to have that upper 8K of memory space not used, and the ROM has to be enabled. The mirrors have to be able to be shown so that it can pull the character set from the ROM, even though it's pulling the ROM data from the upper 56 to 64K RAM area, or memory space. So there's some logic that needs to go on there to make sure that that can happen, right? It's not just a simple, uh, just put ROM chip select on and just leave it there. It wouldn't work, right? You have to dynamically turn on and off ROM chip select. So there has to be some circuitry for that. And so I'm kind of borrowing something from another guy that apparently made that. He made a external ROM board, and this actually happened after we had kind of these discussions, because I originally made the cartridge board back in February, right, of
Yeah.
this year. It looks like he came out with this EEPROM board for the ROMs, I think in maybe June, July of this year. So it happened after we talked about that. So now that I see his design, I kind of pulled his design into this new cartridge board, right? And so, but he also includes 16K capability ROMs, right? So there's a project that came out that I didn't know about back then called Sponzy, I think, Sponzy, right?
Right.
Which is Spectrum on basically a ZX81. So they take a Spectrum ROM and they take all the color and all that stuff out of it, but it still runs like a Spectrum, right? But it needs 16K. So he made sure that his design could support the 16K for Sponzy. The other thing is, he talks about, if you look at his forum posts, you could kind of do some cartridge things like we're doing with the 1510 in the 16K space, at least with an 8K cartridge. You could put the cartridge in the upper 8K and just copy the ZX81 ROM and put it in the lower 8K, right? And you could boot it and run the cartridge right from the ROM board. You wouldn't be able to do 16K stuff, but there's still plenty of programs out there that aren't 16K,
Yeah.
right? That you could use. And then I know there's some other ROMs that came out that actually don't use the whole 8K, upper 8K, but they use 2 or 3 or 4K of it for things. So having that 16K capability does help. So that's the other project that I kind of did since I was doing all this cartridge crap. That's related to that, right? I mean, I've already got the board layout, so I know how much space I've got to work with, and so anyway, that takes the 512 megabit flash chips, right? The 64K flash chips, so you can have up to four. No, you can have up to four 16K ROMs or eight 8K ROMs on the cartridge, right? And so you have a dip switch on there that selects that. There's no fancy, 7-segment displays on that one. So you can actually, well, I don't know. Like I said, those boards are still coming to me.
Yeah.
Parts are here. That's why I said I'm gonna have to build up a few and test them. I don't know that they'll work. I think somebody was mentioning he had some problems, so we'll see. We'll get through it. But that's just another thing that I brought up.
Very cool.
Is the ROM replacements. So I know that I'd kind of like to see Treeforth work. Other than having to open the dang thing up.
Me too, because I have a I have my 1000 mounted in a cradle, which is this massive metal keyboard unit, and I don't feel like drilling holes in it to mount a switch. And if it was all external, the switch was on a little expansion card, life would be easier.
Right. And you could try different, like I said, it's some people were kind of saying in the forums, well, why do you want to do that? Well, there's a lot of different ZX81 ROMs out there.
Yep.
Right. There's the original ones, and they fixed it and created more problems, and they fixed that one and created a couple more, but then there's some, enhanced ZX81 ROMs, and, you could even put a 1500 ROM in there.
Yeah.
Right. And then stick it into your ZX81, and now you've got kind of like what I made is a 1500 running in a ZX81 system. So you could actually plug the 1510 clone cartridge thing onto the back of the ROM board, and you could actually run cartridges in auto boot, right? Because you're running the 1500 ROM on your ZX81, and it goes to the cartridge board, and all the magic happens there. So,
Ryan, did you have a question or something?
No, can you hear me?
Yep, we can hear you.
I was just trying to think of anything to add to that other than I guess the converter is the P2 1510 program in my ZX81 utilities on my GitHub.
Right.
You probably pop that link in there.
Yeah, could you?
But that's the code that does it. It does it a couple of ways. I think I may just want to. The only change I might make is to change the default to be the tape-like method. Just seems to work better all around. And the memory overhead is minimal because I don't have to do as much custom copy encode. But it does two methods. One, which is basically a generic version of the Timex loader doing what it did. And the other one is one that loads it like you loaded it from tape, which tends to work better, probably for obvious reason. What it does not yet support is the 24K animals. We don't really have I don't know that we have a good an example of that. So I might at some point sit down with 81 since it purportedly supports that.
24K sort of ROM image?
Yeah, so apparently there'd be another 8K above, probably right above that second 8K.
Yeah, A000 to BFFF.
Okay.
But I'd have to look at 81 to see what
Well, there were never any cartridges that big.
But there were definitely some
I don't know if the intent was you've got more than 16K. Of course, you would have to stick the 16K somewhere else.
Yeah, or the other thing could be where you could access that memory from a basic program, right? So
Yeah, it
maybe you
could
would
just
have,
be like more of a proper ROM,
right,
which you could make any of that regular ROM that you can access or something. I mean, it is a ROM, but that just held code that you accessed.
right,
The first 8K, I suppose, if you if you made that first byte 0, it wouldn't auto run it. So it could just be code that sat there to be called.
right.
Machine code utilities, if you wanted, you could do
Switch
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's definitely,
Now that one I'd have to either change the loader or you just make the ROM yourself.
Yeah, imagine a cartridge, for instance, that had a bunch of screenshots, right? TS1000 screens, right? And you wrote a little program to go through those. You could load those screens so fast, you know what I mean? You could almost make some animation.
Yeah, given
probably
how
happen.
small how you could compress it, because it's, the graphics is all characters. You could, make very small compressed versions of a screen,
Mhm.
and like you were saying, Carl, you could stack up a bunch of them and have, some animation. You could probably even play, 10 seconds of a highly compressed movie.
Yeah. Don't know
It
why
might
I'd want
not
to
look
do
that
that.
great, though, however. You might not recognize the movie.
Well, if it's a good movie like Blade Runner, then anybody would recognize it.
I would recognize it, yeah.
Well, you still have high res graphics capabilities, right? That if you could
That's true.
you could use.
You could use that. Absolutely.
And then the other thing, kind of now that I'm thinking about it, is I know Tim and of course David kind of lit the little fire under our butts about it, is for the ZX zine to kind of get this 1510 project kind of documented to a degree.
Yeah.
Right. So that because really probably the only people that know about this thing is on this call. And at least the ZX zine will get some more exposure to it, especially I guess from overseas. And so those guys, I mean, they know of the 1510. It's not like they don't know about it, because I mean, Superflow, all his documentation for the original reverse engineering was over on the UK stuff, right, on the UK forums. So, but I just don't know, I don't think it's really been brought up much recently, especially now that Ryan's, kind of come up with a way to convert tape programs into cartridge programs for the 1000 and the ZX81. So I think that would have some more, I think more people would be more interested in it from that standpoint. Because I think on its own, it's kind of boring. I mean, there's 4 programs Timex came out with it. Right. So now if you can load Monster Maze, 3D Monster Maze, and all the Croxy Road and all these newer games, actually, like Ryan was doing with Croxy Road. I can't remember, that guy came up with those games in 2012, I think, right?
Yeah, people are still programming.
Yeah.
For the 81. It's crazy.
Right. So it's like, let's take the tape out of it, right? So it just loads right away and you can enjoy it, right then and there. So that's kind of the whole, I think that'll give it some more life, especially once, I don't know how Tim's come along with that article, but since he's here now, I guess we can ask him.
I think for ZXZine, the only thing I'm waiting for is information on the TS Pico. I kind of want to make that the highlight of the zine, so I don't want to go out until we get the TS Pico information. But you're right. I think there's a lot of people that read the zine over in Europe, and maybe they're interested in the 15. If they've got the ZX Spam, they really need the cartridge thing. But some people want extra hardware, as part of their hobby. They want the hardware, like you guys out there, that not like me. So they might get some interest from those guys.
Right. And that's the other thing too.
Tim, are you serious? You don't actually like to have real hardware at all?
Actually, I collected hardware for many years, never really touched it. I got rid of most of it except for my Sinclair collection. I really don't touch it. The fact that I've got a little netbook, 11-inch thing that can run basically any hardware I want on it, in emulation mode is perfectly fine with me. I
That's
sit back in my
weirdo.
recliner and I've
Weirdo.
got 3 different machines to play with: ZX81, well, 4: Spectrum, ZX81, 2068, and QL.
I'm almost with you, Tim, except I still have, I mean, literally have a 2068 to my left. I've got a 1000 to my right, but all this other hardware stuff, I don't have any desire to collect it.
And I know for me, I'm kind of a hardware guy, so I do like to have it. I don't necessarily, break it out and play with it all the time, but I don't know, it ticks a box in my brain that I have it. I have the hardware, but not that I necessarily use it a whole lot.
Well, and like I use my 2068 as a platform. I'm helping Ricardo and Gustavo and the rest of the guys with the TS Pico stuff. So I test it, and when I assemble it, I test it on my thing before I send it out. But I've also designed a replacement keyboard for myself. I have a couple of other hardware projects, sort of irons in the fire that I want to finish building. So to me, it's a nice, both the 1000 and the 2060 are nice platforms for can I shoehorn this ridiculous technology into this thing, right?
No, the most interesting part is we use the 2068 today.
Mm-hmm.
We create in Python. We pass hours in the machine like 80s because with different language, but with the same machine.
Yeah.
Right.
Ricardo passed all the day modify and testing the Python modules. I see the assembly code and learn about the ROMs and the interface one or whatever. It's a really interesting hobby to do that. Yeah.
And eventually, like you say, irons in the fire. I know I've talked to Ryan about this. I would like to at some point really get a 2068 and an interface one to work together to actually really hook up micro drives to the 2068 and have that work.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
there's a ROM that's out there. What was it, Ryan? Goddamn, I'm drawing a blank on the name.
Well, you're talking about the ROM for the Warrior Evo?
Series 1?
Yeah, where they kind of, and I think it's at Wes Wrobowski or whatever. I think he's the one that kind of came up with that. But
it's Keith. Keith, who's here today.
Oh, is that?
Yes.
Maybe he could enlighten us.
Keith, I mean, do you want to?
And how about that OS 64 version?
I see the cartridge.
Keith, you muted yourself and unmuted yourself. Or hang on.
No, yes, I see the cartridge for the interface one, and the work is really good because it's necessary to move all the variables for the Spectrum to the new Timex location, because the Timex has an extra system variables that use the same location as the first variable for the interface one.
Yeah.
And you need to recompile all the code, and it's really, really hard work to do that.
Hey, Keith.
Really, yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Do you remember doing this? Can you?
Yeah, a long time ago.
You wouldn't happen to have the code sitting around on a 8.5 by 11.
It might be here somewhere in the basement, but it's been not looked at for probably close to 20 years.
Okay, we'll send a couple guys over.
But it's a another iron in the fire where there has to be an expansion board or maybe, like Gustavo said, a cartridge that has some of that hardware, right? It has a ULA in there. Of course, it has the extra 8K ROM, right, that switches in and out. But this ROM that I guess maybe Keith had some help doing, they work through a lot of those issues, right, where I think they actually could get the interface one to work.
Carl, it was for this emulator called Warievo, and Keith, he changed the interface one ROM so that it would work with the 2068, and also did a version that was the interface one and OS 64. But this is all taking place in DOS in emulation, and then there's a TSR that's involved. There's some documentation on the archive about it.
Well, Ryan was mentioning somebody made a ROM, basically,
it's
the
a fake ROM
16K
image.
ROM,
Yes,
right? The 16K ROM and the XROM
Yep.
images.
Basically, here's what I know.
No, the problem
there's a 24K doc file, 16K of which is a modified home ROM, 8K of which is a modified XROM that contains the interface one code modified to work out of the XROM. And it talks over the port to what would be the interface one hardware that would talk to the microdrive. And but then it would bypass the need for the ROM in the interface one. My belief is, although with the emulator, it's using a DOS TSR to service the port emulation, that it's probably talking in the protocol of the microdrive hardware out that port, and that you would just simply need to have a microdrive hardware on that port to receive what the protocol that would have been emitted by the interface one hardware. And that I don't think that there's necessarily things that make it tied to the emulator other than part of the doc file is a home ROM bank replacement.
Yeah.
No, the problem is in the part of the interface one ROM, use undocumented C80 instruction, but it not exist on the real C80. It's a virtual instruction, and this use as a trigger to modify the ROM and call to the emulator routines. And inside the emulator, they support an emulator of the ULA of the interface one and decoding all the protocol inside the DOS part, not for the C80 word. That's the reason, because you cannot use this ROM in another emulator, because the normal emulator not use the undocumented instruction of the C80. In this specific case, use the instruction ADFD, ADFC, or whatever. If you see on the normal map, those instruction is not used as used by the emulator, the Warievo emulator.
Hey Tim, or sorry Keith, you should be able to unmute. There you go.
Yeah. I didn't raise my hand, but somebody asked me a question, and I'm trying to figure out on this tablet how to get the sent. But it's an Airco interface.
Oh, the thing behind you? Yes.
Yeah.
That was me. I asked him in chat because I thought it was.
Yeah, it's a 256K version. I have
okay.
I have a 64K version also.
Okay, I just have the original one, but it's always nice to see another one.
I thought there were only two of us on here that had one.
I know, I have the 256 version too of the Airco.
You got a two drive version or a 4-drive version?
I use 4-drive version.
Okay, they got different ports than the 2-drive version.
No, you need only to change the wire, put more connector, and works. Change the power supply, and You don't need to
When I
modify
had a
nothing.
256K 2-drive version, I had certain ports to write to access the extra 256K. But on the 4-drive version, I had to change those ports. They wouldn't write to the one that had the 2-drive version.
Yes, of course, yes. No, but I have a switch to enable 2+2.
The fun part is I still have the receipts from when I purchased it. That's actually kind of fun.
Well, you can buy a lot of hardware now for that money you spent then.
Yeah, but I'm missing some floppies, and especially the 96 TPI, because it's high density for the ears, and I only can read some of the 40 tracks only. Yeah.
So kind of to wrap up the cartridge things, I know we had talked about maybe even making cases. That's beyond. I'm not a 3D, program guy. But if somebody can get these cartridges, the boards, and plug them in and figure out how to make a case for them, I know that had been talked about.
Well, Carl, there is a guy here who does 3D stuff.
Yeah.
If you sent him, one each of those boards, I bet he could figure it out and make some nice enclosure and a cartridge.
Yeah, I think the cartridge you could probably, it wouldn't fit in a regular Timex one because it's a different size board. But
yeah, it'd have to be a little bit bigger.
Right. But yeah, I mean, you'd also have to plug it in to make sure how low it sits and all that kind of thing. But I mean, I really have a problem with it sticking out naked like that. It's kind of there's all the electronics. But if you dropped a penny or a dime or something on there, well, bad things could happen, right? So, or spilled your Coke. What?
Repurpose the RAM pack case.
Yeah,
sure.
Maybe.
Yep.
But and the other thing I kind of wanted to mention, I know David was kind of kicking that off because I've been doing a lot of stuff. Is just recently I got the the Spectrum came in for me. The recreation from retro games. And I don't know that a lot of people here in the States kind of even know about that because it really isn't, you can't buy it here. I don't know why they didn't offer it here, but and
probably
for
FTC.
I don't know. I mean, retro games, they're the guys that made initially, right, the Mini 64, the D64, right? So they made a Mini 64, they made a full-size 64 replica. Then they went on to do, I think, what was the next one that they did? The Amiga, right? They did a Mini A500 Amiga.
Okay.
Right, a little bitty, a small, these are small machines. They're not, the V64 was a full-size recreation of the Commodore 64. That one I'll give them. But they have a Mini 64, they have a Mini A500 Amiga, then they came out with the A400 Atari 400 Mini, right, which looks like an Atari 400, just a small little thing. But this one they kind of varied on, right, because this one's not a Mini. I mean, the Spectrum's pretty small to begin with, so why make a small version of the Spectrum, I guess, in their mind, since it's so small to begin with. So they just basically recreated the original Spectrum, and they did a damn good job of it, really. I mean, the keyboard is almost identical to the original.
Squishy, terrible.
Well, it feels good to me.
Okay.
I mean, it's and when you open it up, it actually has the flex ribbons, just like in the same spots that the original Spectrum had them. So you could actually plug that keyboard into a real Spectrum, right? And probably even, you couldn't put the Spectrum board in there because it has totally different ports on the back for that thing. But it was just somebody was trying to open the keyboard up, but there's I think Noel's Retro Lab, he opened it up and showed pictures inside too, but he couldn't get the keyboard open because on the inside there's no way to get to the keyboard. So it's kind of like the Spectrum, where I think he was saying it's either that metal plate is taped down like it was on the real Spectrums, or maybe it can't be the little metal tabs like I've seen on the Sorenzis that I have, because those actually come out through the bottom and you got to twist them and you can push the metal the keyboard thing off. So they either are screwed down or, I mean, probably glued down with adhesive. But I was really surprised that they recreated the membrane. Well, I guess they'd have to, because that's how else are you going to make a Spectrum keyboard, right? It has to be a membrane keyboard with a rubberish,
Yep.
actuators and all that kind of thing. But it was just totally impressive how they did that. Plus, like I said, it emulates pretty much all of the Spectrum models, right? Not just the 48K, but the 128s, the plus twos, the plus threes. It has some special modes in it. You can even load things like you're loading from tape. It'll load tap files and show the borders and the noise, and so you can actually, and it takes as long as a tap file takes to load the program, right? But these tap files, they don't have any dropouts or anything, so it's always going to load, right? You're never going to get to the end and have a error loading tape, right? So I haven't played with mine yet. I mean, I took it out, took the pictures. Again, another hardware thing. Like I said, at least I got it now, right? And it wasn't that expensive. I think it was like, I think with shipping and everything, maybe like $123, I think, to me, which isn't too bad. But at least it's HDMI, right? You don't have none of this RF crap.
It's all a little USB bus inside it.
Right. It's got two boards in there, right? It's got 4 USB ports on the back, a USB-C for power, 5-volt power. It's got a reset switch on the back, a home switch. It uses their carousel program like they do on these other machines that I just mentioned. Plus, you can actually save games. So if you like playing Manic Miner or something like that, and you get to a hard part, you can actually just it saves the last 40 seconds of gameplay. So if you die, right, you could just go back and rewind it to before you die and let it start playing again, and you can play, because you don't want to start the whole game over, right?
Well, Manic Miner, you can go through all 20 levels in like one guy, though.
Yeah, right, sure. But that's what, some of these reviewers were talking about, that a lot of these games, you have to be kind of good to get to the end of them. Well, with this recording thing, you can just, after you die, you just hit the thing to record. So it records the last 40 seconds. You go play back before you died a little bit, and then, you get another shot at it, right? And I think it has 4 saves per game. And then you can load your own games, right? You're not just limited to the 48 that are in there, right? You can load any Spectrum game that you want into the thing. Plus, it actually goes to basic. You get the basic mode, right? It'll go to. It doesn't say copyright Sinclair. It says copyright Retro Games 2024 or whatever. But it's kind of interesting to see that copyright message in the K cursor flashing on there. That's kind of cool.
That's cool.
Retro Games is a British company, right?
They might be. Yeah, I think they are. But all the other machines they offered here in the States, and I have all of them. But like I said, they were minis. They were small little, fake. They look like the real thing, but they were tiny versions of them, right? So it's kind of nice that they did the Spectrum justice and made it, full size, and a real keyboard that works. Because all these mini ones, they have the keyboard, but they don't work.
They don't do
It's just a fake. Yeah, it's just a fake keyboard.
Well, you can, of course, plug in a USB keyboard to it and use them.
Right,
Yeah.
you can.
Yeah.
And except for the big 64 that they made, that had a fully working, that's a fully working keyboard and everything. But anyway.
I want to check with the other Tim who's here. And Tim, I'm going to ask you to unmute. Because I can't remember if you're new to us or not.
This is my first meeting.
Sweet.
I joined the mailing list a couple of meetings back, and this one came around early enough that I was like, yeah, I can do that tonight.
Early enough. Oh my gosh.
So,
what time zone are you in that this is early?
Well, I mean, like close enough to the date that
okay.
I was like, oh, I should do this tomorrow or the next day. So anyway, I don't know. Do we do a little intro here?
Yeah, we do. So
I'm
this is where
56 years old. My very first computer was a ZX81 when I was 11 years old. And when I was 13, I started teaching basic programming classes on it. And one thing led to another. Went through the VIC-20, never had a Commodore 64. I actually started on one computer before that, which was my uncle's S100 system with compiled BASIC.
Oh wow!
And he bought me one of those, 101 computer game books, and said, "Here," gave it to me and my brother. I was 10, he was 8, and they're like, "Okay, see what you can do." So of course, first you figure out how to type and get into the editor, and then the second thing you do is you debug before you play.
Yeah,
that was my life. So
wow.
Anyway, that launched a career. I'm still doing IT stuff, and still got a ZX81 over in the thing. I haven't fired it up. I got no TV to hook it up to.
Well, I mean,
that's easy to fix.
Exactly.
I see little kits for adding getting it to an HDMI output or something more composite like.
Yep. Those little composite adapters are cheap and not too
Oh,
difficult.
half the time you can go down to your local Goodwill and they might even have a tube-based TV for $5 that works.
Yeah, I think if I drag another few things like that home, my wife's going to have an issue. But,
all right, so Tim, here's something that you can sneak into the house.
Okay.
There's a device called a Wespe, although it's German, so it's probably Vespi. And it's based on the ESP32 microcontroller, whatever. You hook it up to the power, the ear, and the mic. And I think the ear is also TV. I can't remember off the top of my head. Anyway, 3 lines, 3 lines plus ground. Yeah. And what it does is it adds a sort of fast loader to your 81. It has a VGA output on it.
Okay.
I think save is at the regular speed. And the other cool thing is that it has Wi-Fi. So, you turn it on, and one of the things you set up through your 81, the Wi-Fi, right? If you have to type it, God help you if your password's in lowercase. So you have to type in your password, right? And then it gets on the Wi-Fi, and then it shows up as a web server for your, on your local network, and you can then use. Joe, hang on a sec. You can use that. Okay, Joe, hold it up. Nope. You can use that.
Cool.
Well, you took the chip out, Joe.
Oh yeah, I'm using it somewhere else.
Okay. You connect to the web server from your computer and upload your .p files, and you can load them directly.
Oh, okay.
It's wonderful. I finally got one built and working. Oh, hang on, Joe.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
So that's the Wespe that's just no video.
Okay.
And yeah, so basically just solder some components to the dev board, and your ZX81 has Wi-Fi now.
Yeah.
So
it's amazing.
Right? So you can just
get
drop
4 packets.
And then if you plug it into this board, like a little carrier or a hat, then you can get VGA out.
Yeah.
And it also will drive a small 3-inch monitor like one of these.
Right, directly through the side TFT port there.
Yeah.
And then, Tim, your wife will never see any of it.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly. It's going to be so small.
Okay, I got one more. I'll be right back.
With a 3-inch screen, did he ever put a Fresnel in front of it so he could be like in the movie Brazil?
Yes, exactly.
Well, is this the Tim that was that worked on Ryan's stuff to get it over to Windows?
No, this is a new Tim.
Oh, okay.
This is
his first meeting, but I thought I saw somebody on the forums that helped Ryan get that converted to Windows, all his programs.
Oh, is that wonder which Tim that was?
I thought it was Tim. It might be a different, maybe it's somebody else, but worked.
Tim, you might have to be like Tim 4 or something.
Team 3.
At least Tim.
I claim 3.
And Tim, since you got the 1000 or the ZX81, there's this cartridge player that somebody made.
Yeah,
Yeah.
instant
Allows you
load
to
game.
play-
Almost instant load.
So I've messed around with a whole bunch of other hardware, and I had this one idea once. People were building their own CPUs and everything, and with relays and with TTL logic and stuff.
Mhm.
And so I set about and I designed it out to build myself a 12-bit move machine. So the only instruction it has is move A to B, right?
Oh,
And it move B to A and back and forth, stuff like that. And the idea is that by writing a word into a location and you write a word into another location, then the fact that you wrote them into those two locations, there's a machine on the back end, there's an ALU that can do the addition and present the answer in a third place, right? And so all you need to do is move stuff back and forth, and that's all your assembly language is. And then everything that's on the end of those moves or those reads is actually doing all the computation. And so I had this idea that the idea was you could have this move machine, and then you could hook all these ridiculous pieces of hardware up to it. So like if you wanted a random number generator, you use a Rube Goldberg thing like that would hit the little trouble dice that pops around, and then you'd have a camera to read it, and all of that would feed a data value back to the bus. And I was going to use the Sinclair as like my output device, and so you would basically have a program on the Sinclair that would be able to read data out of a dual port RAM chip. And so the computer would write stuff into it, the CPU would write into it, and then the Sinclair would read it and use it as a display. Anyway,
totally reasonable. I mean, that sounds like a good weekend project, just
You fit right in. You fit right in here.
Yeah.
I was going to do the whole thing on breadboards too. I was talking to a friend of mine about it. We were trying to figure out what we were actually attempting to do with this thing. And he said, okay, so the whole point of this is to maximize embedded irony.
Yes.
Yes. And so like for my RAM, I thought, well, I could use a whiteboard with an XY and it could make a mark and it could read the mark. And so you could actually watch the machine write its ones and zeros. Anyway.
Jumbo Etch-a-Sketch?
I hadn't figured out what to do with an Etch-a-Sketch yet, but you could use that as an output device too. That's your plotter.
Well, Tim, a gazillion years ago, they used CRTs for memory.
Right. Yeah.
Not a lot of memory, but some.
Just enough. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, how did that work?
That's a very good question.
Oh, okay.
You scan it, and then you're also reading it. And the phosphor lasts long enough that you can come back around and read it again without it dying.
It's high persistent phosphor. It's a special phosphor inside the tube. And with high remains, 1 or 2 seconds. When you pass the beam, it's memorized the status. Yeah, exactly.
It would hang around long enough that if you read it again, you could feed it back and write it. It was stable. Well, they also used mercury delay lines too. That was
dynamic refresh RAM. Very cool. Well, Tim, I'm glad you I'm glad you found us, and were able to join us, and at such an early that we fell into your memory hole.
Yeah, the window was there. Yeah,
and did not fall back out. Right.
Yeah. I did get refreshed soon enough to remember. Anyway, I appreciate being here. It's just interesting to see a bunch of guys still talking about a 40-year-old obsolete computer.
What now?
Hey, what are you talking? You're out of
here.
We
were with you there,
David.
We were with you right up to 40 year.
Right. Yeah. The word. Yeah. Obsolete is harsh.
That kind of hurts. That kind of cuts to the quick there, Tim.
It's a veteran computer.
I'm getting there. So
experienced computer.
Understood.
No, to be fair, I have some computers that are a fair bit older than that. So.
And now, are they obsolete, Mowgli, or are they just like more experienced?
No, they're fantastic at warming in the winter. They make great heaters.
Not very efficient conversion of electricity to heat, though.
I try not to look at that too much.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Well,
I was going to say, well, ultimately, everything's 100% efficient in converting the electricity into heat. It's just some of them do a lot more of it.
Yep.
And I was going to say, I mean, it's, obsolete's probably not the right word for them because they did have the TS-1000 running a nuclear power plant. Well, it was a fake one, but still, they had that program where it was running a nuclear power plant.
If they put a couple 8-bit ports on the on the back side of it, it could have hooked up to the
Oh, heck yeah. Oh, yeah.
Real time.
I mean, come on, 3.5 megahertz Z80 in there?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Now, if they'd had one of those at 3 Mile Island, the meltdown would not have happened.
That's right.
Because it would have reacted like that.
That's right.
So I've got one old story I'll tell here I heard about from years ago. There's somebody, a 2068 user in Florida, who hooked up a wind machine or some sort of weather station to his 2068. And during some hurricane, it was collecting data. And the National Weather Service found out about it and said, hey, can we use it? Because we lost ours before ours failed before yours did. I don't know who it was. I heard it's probably somewhere like maybe the 89 Cats Fest. But again, someone had a weather station to their 2068 and the National Weather Service needed that data because they didn't have it. So,
Tim, I think that story is in one of the Cats newsletters because I've read that story.
Okay.
The sad thing about it, though,
from the Cats Fest, the Cats Fest, we had a lot of people all over coming in. I remember a guy from Florida who actually had there were a few of those clear 26 were made.
Mm-hmm.
I thought there was only one, but apparently there's more than one.
Mm-hmm.
But one of them was a guy from Florida who came up and demoed it at the Cats Fest. So
it was at Indy too.
Say again?
It was at the Indy Fest also.
Okay. Was there more than one there, Paul? Was there more than one made, or was there only one?
I heard there were 3. 2 of them have never surfaced.
Okay.
Usually when they make clear ones, it's during the development process, right? Because they need to see how everything's fitting inside and all that kind of thing. So a lot of times the prototypes are clear, right? When they actually make these products.
So we were told that it was clear for a sales reason. You could demo the unit and show, hey, look what's inside. Wasn't designed to be a production, but just a demo unit. That's what I heard.
Okay.
And the clear when the loose went out the back door.
The clear what?
The clear when it was loose in the wild went out the back door.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think Eric had one, and I know that Joe, whose last name escapes me, but was one of the guys publishing a magazine called Some. He had one. He also made a little cartridge that you put into the slot on the 2068 to it was a parallel print interface, and there's a photo in his advertising of his cartridge inside a clear 2068. So at minimum there's 3 of them floating around. Yeah. Cool. Well, you know what? Anybody else want to jump in with anything that they've been up to? Not criminal activities, but anything else?
So I did actually go to the Vintage Computer Fest Berlin in October. And that was interesting because you get to see a whole bunch of computers you don't get to see over here in the United States. So that was pretty cool. But there was a guy there who also had at least Spectrum machines, most of which he had heavily modified. But there were a variety of other machines. There were also, like, somebody brought a couple of the old DEC PDPs. Some of the smaller ones, they didn't bring a full rack or anything like that. This took place actually at one of the side rooms of a technical university in Berlin. And so it was relatively small. I'd say there were probably on Saturday, there were probably somewhere between like 60 and 100 people total. as far as people exhibiting stuff, like there wasn't a flea market or any of that stuff. It was basically just there was one group that was selling a couple of books that they had written and magazines that they had done. But other than that, it was pretty much just a exhibit stuff, play with stuff. I mean, all of it was like, running something. And so it was pretty fun. And there were a wide variety of people there. A few Brits, some Germans, a Hungarian, at least one American, and things like that. So that stuff. So it was a fun small convention. There were a fair number of different clubs represented that are kind of like collectives that are groups of different people that basically live in the same place and have kind of joined together to rent a small place. Especially in Germany, that's easier to do because if you declare yourself sort of a historical club in Germany, there's a special category for that, and you can get money from the federal government to help you with, like, basically to exist, and to have like a club room or something like that. So there's a wide variety in Germany of different organizations that are either historical railroad clubs, historical technology clubs of various sorts, computers, radios, stuff like that, because it's easier in that environment to do it than it is here where you're kind of doing it on your own.
Yeah. That's amazing.
So, but it was cool. At some point, and I'm not going to promise anytime soon, but we will see. I have a bunch of pictures from it. I want to put that together as a web page, probably, and that'll go in my on the Tech Library website somewhere, for as fun things and interesting things that I have seen. And when I get that set up, then I'll let you know a URL, and you can stick that somewhere.
Cool. Very cool.
Where are you going to stick it, David?
Well, he says he's going to put it on his website. So I'll
Never
just
mind.
figure it out. That was rude.
I think he's just going to stick it on his Timex site, is what I was going to say.
Yeah, I could put it there as a little blog post. Yeah, good point. So I want to mention a couple things. I have this Google alert for, I think, the phrase Timex Sinclair, and every once in a while it pops up. Usually it pops up crap like somebody's trying to sell a Timex on a Craigslist in Wyoming or whatever. But a couple of weeks ago, it popped a result for this discussion on Threads, which is Facebook's, Twitter, whatever. And it was a discussion about vintage computers and what was your first computer, and a lot of people were saying Timex Sinclair or Sinclair ZX81, whatever. One of the people who replied said that he had used it when he was he had 1000. He used it when he was in college to as part of some electronic computer art projects. So I got a hold of him and we chatted. Really cool shit. He's going to join us 2 weeks on Sunday and talk about how he used ZX81 to help him do his, not ZX81, 1000, help him do his electronic art, computer art projects when he was in college in the early 80s. And now he does all kinds of puzzle stuff. Really interesting guy. The one project that he did I think it was in 82. All the stuff is gone. It was like tape and slides, and it was this multimedia experience. All that stuff's gone. But he sort of recreated it during the pandemic in Python, and there's a video on YouTube that I'll share out to the group, so you can sort of see, what this thing is. And then the other thing is, as you may know, I have stuff in my basement. And the stuff is not stuff that I want in my basement. I've already, done what I needed to do. I've, archived it. I've, done whatever, or it's a thing that's been archived already, or it's 15 copies of the 1000 manual. Anyway,
if you only have one copy, you're doing good.
That's what I would like to do. I would like to get down to one copy. And so here's where you guys come in. I'm going to put it on my website, and it's going to be name your own price. I know what the sort of the basic shipping cost is for stuff of a certain weight, and if it's there are some things that are kind of bigger and heavier, and so whatever the minimum amount on there is just to cover the shipping. So literally, this is you can get it for the cost of shipping if that's your jam. And it's not listed. It's going to be in a special category, and it's only going to be available when I send out this email. It's taking me time to get this crap put into the computer, into the website. But there's a bunch of, it's not all 1000 manuals. There's other things that I'm sure you guys want. I'm sure you guys want in your garage, or you guys don't have basements, do you, Carl or Adam?
No.
Yeah, they're unusual to have here.
Yeah. Okay. So
I have a warehouse in a separate building.
there you go.
The manual for the 1000 or the 1500 is the same, change only the cover, or just internally
I've not
different?
done a comparison of the two. I could, because I do actually have a 1500 manual down in the basement. I only have one of those, so I'm doing good by Mowgli's count. But yeah, I'll do a comparison and see what the difference is between they're actually both on archive. So if you want to look, look yourself.
Because I don't know if the first 1000 machines has the manual copy for the CX81. Just only put Timex on, or I don't know. Because the initial, I don't know if that is true, but the initial sale of the computer in US maybe come import from England. Just only put the name, the label 1000 or not.
No, there's a difference between the 1000 and the 81. I mean, if not, the main difference is that there's 2K of RAM in the 1000.
Yep.
But the board itself, it'll say ZX81 issue 3 usually. And they obviously redid the case, retooled the case a little bit to have an inlay versus embossed letters.
But any private companies does not import the CX81 to US before
Sinclair
Timex?
did.
Yeah.
Sinclair.
From the Sinclair, yeah, Sinclair sold them here.
Yeah, they had an office
themselves.
first in Boston, then up in Nashua, New Hampshire.
And of course, I bought
the ZX81 before the 1000 even on the market. I got mine in November of 81.
Yeah.
And the 1000 wasn't out until summer of 82. So, over a year.
Well, the deal was that once Sinclair had sold a certain number of machines, Timex would take over the North American market. It was like 500,000.
And just so you know there, Gustavo, that the ZX81s that Sinclair sold here in the US were FCC approved. So they actually had the silver paint inside.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
right.
You're right. I know how the history, but I know it in US, but Okay, very clear for me
Yeah,
now.
Because I know Ryan's got a ZX81 that he bought from Sinclair back, when they were sold, just like Tim.
Yeah.
And it's
Okay.
and it's got the silver, it's FCC label on there, on the bottom and everything. So, they weren't just copies of the British one; they were actually made for the U.S. market.
Okay, similar for the RAM pack, right?
The
Some
RAM
are
pack?
Sinclair.
It
Yeah,
started out with
have
that.
Probably,
another
yeah, because it
information.
had FCC approval as well. Yeah, so, and then when the 1016 came out, they just again retooled the case. I'm sure to like
Yep.
like David said, to have the little inlay for the tiny little
Oh my
Timex
God.
Sinclair
So
1016
small.
label.
I mean, it's scaled, right?
Yes, right.
It's
It
to
is.
scale. But, who thought that was a good idea?
It's cute.
Okay, clear for me now. Okay, after 40 years. Thank you for the info.
Now
Your
I'm sure.
wishes come true.
Now I'm sure there's probably people that did import them from Britain, right?
Yep.
So they would be the British ones. But we have 60 hertz here, so there was also the 50, 60 hertz thing, right? So the boards that were made for the U.S. obviously had the jumper or the diode, or I think it's a jumper.
Resistor. Yeah, resistor jumper. Yep.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, the resistor jumper to tell it that it was 60 hertz for here. But yeah, I'm sure you could have imported some, but it would actually be a 50 hertz model, right? It would have been a European or a UK model.
Right. Yeah, and as Ryan points out, they had been selling the ZX80 here, prior. The
Oh, and that
ZX80
reminds me one.
So
And that
when I
reminds
was
me one
looking at
more thing. Oh, sorry. I was going to say
Go
the
ahead.
modulator. The modulator is different for the
Modulator is
US ones.
different,
It's a VHF modulator instead of the UHF, and the outputs of the modulator are on opposite sides. So the case you had to change the case.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, Tim.
So with the ZX80, I don't remember it ever being sold here. It didn't advertise well, but the ZX81 was advertised in major magazines like Popular
Mhm.
Science in a big 2-page ad.
Mhm.
I remember reading an earlier version of Popular Science, that little side article, like "What's New," that talked about this computer in Britain is only so big, and this when it first came out in Britain, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. All right, fine. I forgot about it, and then I saw this big 2-page ad in the October issue of Popular Science. It's like, ooh, what's my bank account? Well, I've got enough.
Yeah.
So
Well, yeah.
I bought it with
My
extra,
dad's bank
extra
account for
memory
me. So.
where I went.
The 80 was advertised in Byte. I remember at the very least it was in Byte, and maybe in Creative Computing, but I don't remember for sure.
Wasn't the ZX80 mainly offered in kit form?
No,
Both.
no, but
Both.
the 81 was.
You could get it in both,
Okay.
I think. Yeah, the 80 and
Okay.
the 80. They kind of carried that over to the ZX81, right? You could get them both, a kit
So,
or assembled.
Not here. And the kit, no, so the 80 was not sold as a kit, but there was a thing called the Micro Ace, which was a clone of the ZX80, but with a couple things changed. Like they moved a couple of data lines, and that thus scrambled the ROM itself. And there was Sinclair took Comp Shop, the people who made the Micro Ace, to court, and the judge couldn't understand any of this crap, right? The only thing that he could tell was that the keyboard of the Micro Ace was red and the keyboard of the ZX80 was blue, and so maybe they were different machines. Anyway, the upshot of it all was that Micro Ace was allowed to sell Comp Shop was allowed to sell the Micro Ace only through mail order, and in the United States only it was specifically only through mail order, and not like in retail shops. So Sinclair sort of effectively shut Micro Ace out, and then when they came out with the 81, Micro Ace couldn't clone that. So yeah, there's a article about it in an early issue of Sync magazine. David All talks to the guy from the Australian company, the name of which escapes me right now. But anyway, look up Micro Ace on my website. You'll find the details. It's really crazy.
I'm curious, David. Have you read every possible Timex Sinclair magazine?
Dude, I
and memorized its contents.
What do you do? You're scanning it. You're just like, oh, that's interesting. Oh, this is why it takes forever, because I'm reading the goddamn thing while I'm scanning
it. Well, there's all this time between the meetings, so what else are you going to do?
Right. What else am I going to do with my time?
So are you the guy that went and scanned all those copies of Syntax and?
Yeah.
Okay. I've read through almost all of them, so
he's guilty.
There's some other folks who scan stuff, like Sync magazine. Somebody scanned that a long time ago, and I just sort of touched up with a couple issues here, and Syntax. Somebody scanned a fair number of them, and I just filled in, the rest of them. But
thank you for your service, sir.
Oh yeah, I love it because I get to read this history stuff, right? For instance, I knew about Mowgli because of things that I read in these various newsletters, right? And I'm like, I go out and Google these people, right?
He pulled out things I had completely forgotten about.
Exactly. I tracked Mowgli down. And I'm like, you should come to our meetings.
Now the good news is I never did actually find him sitting on my doorstep to do that.
Right.
He did that more electronically, just to be sure.
Yep.
And do you know how are saved or we recover with your shop on the website for the total info for the Timex?
Oh, you want some numbers? Oh, okay. So I think it's something on the order of 1,200 issues of. Hang on. I'm just gonna log into my website and look at these counts. Okay, so for periodicals, there's about 160-ish, but that includes not just newsletters, but some of the mainstream, like when the New York Times wrote a couple articles, I have them listed in there. Okay, so I have scanned 1,635 issues of magazines, user group newsletters, whatever.
Wow.
And then that has turned into 12,498 articles across all of those sources, which is absolutely bizarre. And that I'm not done, because I know that I have a whole list of things that I've scanned where I haven't actually indexed the articles.
You are in the Guinness. It's the best.
I could be, certainly.
Scan document for the Timex. Yeah.
And all Timex searches come back to your webpage, Dave.
Yeah, when I search, I never get my website.
I just like I've got the most hit count. I think you have each person how many times they're doing something, and I got the highest, I think.
Yes,
or close to it.
Okay, so on that note, our next meeting is December what? Not the 8th, 15th. Oddly enough, because the first Sunday was yesterday. So the third Sunday is the 15th. 2 p.m. That guy Jim who did his computer art using the Timex 1000 will be joining us. And since I didn't show you all of the collected Christmas video clips I made, I will make them into one little short video clip that we can watch either at the beginning or the end on Sunday. And I would encourage you to bring a seasonally appropriate drink.
Eggnog.
Frankly, I don't drink that shit, but you can.
What?
Yeah, it's horrible.
Oh my gosh.
And hopefully I can show the real cartridges, all these.
Yeah, that'll be great.
Because the board should be here by then, and I'll have a couple built up and hopefully tested. So
awesome. All right, thank you, gentlemen. It's been fun.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.